Los Plantados, Cuban political prisoners who opposed forced labor and refused to accept the rehabilitation plans of indoctrination during Fidel Castro's mandate. They were characterized by maintaining a firm, unwavering position of stoicism and rebellion without claudication. Greetings. My name is Miguel Sanchez. I am the founder of the Plantados Project. I want to thank you for being here and of the opportunity of addressing this wonderful group of people. I also want to thank this great nation on behalf of all Cuban Americans for opening your country to my fellow countrymen and to myself. My children and my grandchildren were born in this great land of freedom and opportunities for all. I am also speaking on behalf of those tens of thousands of Cubans who desperately fled communism by throwing their families and themselves into rough or into tube, took to sea and vanished. Los Plantados Project is dedicated to covering this history of the women and men who came together when communists began to dig its claws in Cuba. As the Castro regime began tightening the grip in Cuba, the government began isolating men by forbidding the voicing of thought other than the socialista propaganda. Then, mere men not allowed to meet in groups or in their homes. The Castro militia shut all Catholic schools. They gathered all the priests and nuns and expelled them from the island. Next, the free press was shut down. A few weeks later, guns were forbidden and confiscated. Shortly after war, the currency was changed, breaking the economic backbone of the business community resistance. The next move was the systematic confiscation of all private enterprise as government spies in every block of every neighborhood kept an eye on any Cuban that offered resistance. 62 years later, today, this practice continues. Teachers in school would ask our children if the parents favored the revolution. They were indoctrinated our sons, our daughters, to turn their parents in. The state was their new father, and Cuba was their new mother. Che Guevara continued to hunt for Cubans that resist the revolution. These men often found themselves in front of his fighting squad. The media and Hollywood have sold the image of Che Guevara as a social hero of defiance. Young people display his face on the t-shirts, ignoring the fact that he was a psychopath and criminal. Che personally shot more than 77 Cubans, political prisoners, who disagree with his political thinking. He signed 150 orders to execute civilians by firing squad. Think about that for a moment. The next time you see some useful idiot wearing a Che t-shirt. All in all, and little by little, a web of terror spread through the nation as men will be taken to kangaroo court, tried and convicted to prison, term exciting long. In prison, they were forced to do hard labor, with militants pointing bayonet and stabbing them repeatedly to keep up with the workflow. At other times, the soldier will take a machete and slam the flat blade hard on the prisoner's bare back. This was not only painful, but at times the blade would cut into their flesh. Political prisoners on forced labor were systematically maimed, and their bodies, full of scars, were a living testament of the torture they endured. That's it until three brave men say no to labor force for political prisoners. One of these men was my father, Nerin Sanchez. My father was a patriot that fought all his life for a free Cuba and free and democratic Cuba. As such, I never saw my father in my early youth. First, my father joined Castro fighting against Batista dictatorship. He became a captain during the Castro Revolution, but soon, unhappy with the result, he organized his own guerrilla and began fighting communism. He was captured and taken prisoner in 1961. and sentenced to a series of ongoing and endless prison terms. Even though in prison, he formed a secret army rebellion among the most loyal prisoners, los juramentados. He became one of the first three plantados who resisted the Castro regime implementation of forced labor. The other two men were Alfredo Izaguirre Rivas and Adolfo Rivero Caro. These three giants of Cuba history inspired a movement of stoicism and unbreakable resistance known as the Plantados. Over time, there were a total of 24 of them, and together, these men, blacks, mulattoes, and white, broke the forced labor mandate of the Castro brothers. Eventually, thousands of other political prisoners who opposed forced labor followed in their wake. Political prisoners who did not agree to forced labor in the camp were called plantados. Many of them were killed or beaten without mercy. Worse was the sadist practice of throwing them into the camp's latrines. With a long stick, they would push their head under the black water, full of excrement and urine. Then covered, full of excrement and urine, then covered in the filth. They were locked in windowless galleys and cells for several weeks. This cell, or drawer of short gavetas, they will call them, were 7 feet tall, 22 inches wide, and 6 feet long. In this cell, they would fit 3 men standing back to back, naked, on the floor. They would have a fourth prisoner lie down, forcing the prisoner standing to defecate and urinate, and the other fellow prisoner on the floor. The bottom man was switched periodically to dispense humility equal among the four. These were the conditions the Castro torture machine would use to punish dissident plantados. Their food was thrown at them. If the prisoner did not catch it, the food would fall in the excrement and urine and gather on the floor around the prisoner, forced to lie there. All this in hot tropical climate of Cuba, where there was no air conditioning, no shower, no soap. The stage was unbearable, and they kept them there for days and weeks, and some for months. 4 years the program lasted before the Castro regime ended the forced labor camp under political pressure. After the forced labor camp came to an end, the endless beating of political prisoners continued. The only tool left to the plantados was to go on hunger strike. Even till today, this tool is implemented. At the same time these events were going on in the labor camp of Cuba, other patriots risked their lives in the mountains of Cuba, in the Beaches Bay pegs, and several clandestine operations were uncovering the missiles that ultimately led to the missile crisis. The list of heroes, both men and women, is endless and too long to mention in this brief presentation. From the age of 12 to 19 years old, I became one of the couriers for these political prisoners. I smuggled secret notes and letters hidden in various parts of my body to inform the relatives, other prisoners in other jails on the island, and to let the world know the abuses that those prisoners were being subject to. These letters were written in onion paper and were written in pencil and exceedingly small characters. They would fold them into pellet-sized bullets that were covered in plastic to smuggle them out of the camp. We had to place them in our mouth, and then we taped them behind our legs or scrotum, hoping we would not be strip searched. If caught, prison time would follow. The risk was high, but nothing compared with what our father and mother were facing. Family members often could not see their loved one for months at a time. Often they would be told the prisoner was fusilado, sent to the firing squad. Mothers bringing food to their loved one would be informed to save the food and not to come to the jail any longer. Your son was executed by the fire squad. I could go on and on with the evil nature of these communists, but it would be useless. In the end, these plantados never surrendered to the Castro brothers and forced an end to the forced labor camps. That is their legacy, and we need to let the world know. The sacrifices of these brave men. Of the original 24 Plantados, most are now dead, only 9 survived, and thousands of political prisoners that joined in the resistance against forced labor back then. About 500 are still with us. For posterity, their experience and story are now being recorded, and a monument is being planned to be erected in Miami in their honor. This is the task of the Plantados Project, headed by the Plantados Foundation. Thank you for allowing me to tell you their story. God bless you. God bless America. Make America great again. And this is the terror that took Cuba over.
Tú, vamos a pedirle que interceda por las almas de todos los que mueren por la libertad.
Vamos.
Dios te salve María, llena eres de gracias, el Señor es contigo. Bendita tú eres entre todas las mujeres y bendito es el fruto de tu vientre, Jesús.
¡Viva Cristo Rey!
Santa María, Madre de Dios.
¡Fuego! ¡Fuego! ¡Apunten! ¡A la dictadura! ¡Fuego! ¡Apunten! ¡Viva Cuba libre! ¡Viva Cristo Rey! ¡Fuego! Los plantados. El miedo haciendo estragos, pero el valor como una flor floreció en sus manos. Los plantados. Quisieron doblegarlo, pero más fuerte fue la resistencia. ¿Cuál era? Los plantados. Negados al trabajo más forzado, estos soldados soportaron las torturas y se plantaron.